So tonight we're going to work on double angles. So I would like you to put me on pause and do the try this and come back and check your answer. Okay, so hopefully you did the try this and let's see what you get. So it is finding the sum of two angles here, right? Because it says find sine x plus y, so that's find the sum of two angles. So let's write down the formula for the sum of sine x plus y. So sine x plus y is sine x cosine y plus cosine x sine y. So I know I have to plug something in for sine x and cosine y and add that to cosine x and times sine y. So let's see what we have here. I have sine x is 2/3. Let's plug that in. 2/3 here for sine x. And I have cosine y is 3/4. So what I need to get is I need to get cosine x. So to get cosine x, I have to use sine x. So let's draw a picture. The angle terminates in quadrant 2. So this would be my angle x, my reference angle. So we have sine is opposite over the hypotenuse. So this would be 2 and 3 would be the hypotenuse. So we'll use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. I'm going to call that b. So it'd be 2 squared plus b squared is equal to 3 squared. So that's 4 plus b squared is equal to 9. B squared is equal to 5, square root both sides. B is equal to plus minus the square root of 5. And since we are going to the left of 0 on the x-axis, that's going to be negative. So it's negative the square root of 5. All right, so now we want cosine x. So cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So the adjacent would now be negative the square root of 5 over the hypotenuse, which is 3. So that's a negative. Let me rewrite that. Negative the square root of 5 over 3. Okay, so now we need sine y. In order to get sine y, we have to use cosine y. And it says y terminates in quadrant 4. So here's my y that terminates in quadrant 4. Cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So this would be 3 and 4. It is not a 3, 4, 5 right triangle because 5 is not on the hypotenuse. All right, so we're going to use, I'll put an a here. So it'd be 3 squared plus a squared is equal to 4 squared. So that's 9 plus a squared equals 16. A squared is equal to 7. Take the square root of both sides. We get a is equal to plus minus the square root of 7. Since we're going down on the y value in quadrant 4, it would be negative the square root of 7. Okay, so now I want sine y. Sine is opposite over the hypotenuse. So the opposite side would be negative the square root of 7 over the hypotenuse, which is 4. So now we're going to multiply. So I have 2 over 3 times 3 over 4 would be 6 over 12 plus negative the square root of 5 over 3 times negative the square root of 7 over 4 would be positive the square root of 35 over 12. Remember, when you multiply fractions, you multiply numerators, multiply the denominators. In order to add fractions, you have to have the same denominators, and I do. So I keep the denominator, add the numerators. I can't actually add 6 and the square root of 35, so it would just be 6 plus the square root of 35 all over 12. Okay, so now let's take a look at the double angle formulas, the identities. Okay, so the first one is sine of a double angle, and it's a double angle because it's 2 times the angle, so it's a double angle, is 2 sine A cosine A. So in order to find the double angle for sine, you have to have sine and cosine. Now, look at 3, 4, and 5, 2, 3, and 4. There are 3 different formulas for cosine of a double angle. So which formula do you use? Well, it depends on the information that is given to you. Sometimes it doesn't matter which formula you use. But let's say they only give you cosine. Well, you would want to use this formula, which is cosine 2a equals 2 cosine squared a minus 1, because you only have cosine in the formula. If they give you sine, you would want to use the bottom one. 1 minus 2 sine squared a because you have sine. If they give you sine and cosine, if you want, you could use the top one, which is cosine squared a minus sine squared a. And then the last one would be tangent. And notice in the formula, it's 2 tan a over 1 minus tan squared a. So you have to have tangent for the tan of a double angle. So let's look at the example. It says, if cosine A is negative 5 over 13 and angle A terminates in quadrant 2, find cosine 2A, sine 2A, tan 2A. So since I have cosine and I'm looking for cosine of a double angle, I would want to use this formula here because in this formula you will have to use just cosine, nothing else but cosine. And that's what I have. I have cosine here. So let's write down the formula for cosine. Cosine 2A is equal to 2 cosine squared A minus 1. So it's going to be 2 times something squared minus 1. And what is my cosine? My cosine is negative 5 over 13. Okay, so now let's evaluate. So negative 5 over 13 would be 25 over 169 minus 1. Times by 2 would be 50 over 169 minus 1. And 50 minus 169 would be a negative 119 over 169. And of course, right here, you could just plug that into your calculator. All right, let's take a look at sine 2a. Okay, so sine 2a, sine double your angle, is 2 sine a cosine a. So we need 2 times something times something. So this is what we have. We have the cosine A, which is negative 5 over 13. We need sine A. So it says the angle terminates in quadrant 2. And they give us cosine, which is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So it'd be negative 5 over 13. So you should know this is a 5, 12, 13 right triangle. So we need cosine, which is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So that's 12 over 13. So we have here 2 times negative 60 over 169. And then that's negative 120 over 169. Okay, so let's do tan 2a. So tangent to A is 2 tan A over 1 minus tan A squared. So that's going to be 2 times something over 1 minus something squared. Okay, so I just had this triangle before. Right, so that was negative 5, 13, and this was 12. So I need tangent. Tangent is opposite over the adjacent. So that is going to be 12 over negative 5, so negative 12 fifths. So negative 12 fifths, negative 12 fifths. Okay, so we have 2 times negative 12 fifths is negative 24 fifths. Over 1 minus 144 over 25. So that's negative 24 fifths. Over 1 minus 24 over 25 is negative 119 over 25. And now we have to do same change flip. Right, so that's negative 24 over 5 times negative 25 over 119. So that reduces to 1 and 5. So that would be 120 over 119. Okay, so that's it, and we'll practice in class tomorrow. Have a good night.